You're listening to The Craft, a podcast for professional content creators who want to learn more about the people, process, and strategy behind the best content on the web. In each episode, we talk with writers, designers, and editors from the world's leading content teams and learn the secrets to their success. Let's jump in and get you inspired for your next story.
Hello and welcome to this episode of The Craft, brought to you by Shorthand. I'm Rachel Westbury, a senior editor here at Shorthand, and today my very special guest is Ricky Robinson, CEO at Shorthand. That's right, today I'm interviewing my boss. No pressure though, right? All right, let's kick off with some background on Ricky. 7 years ago, he was persuaded to stop working on his own platform for journalism. And this led to the Shorthand team instead. Before all of that, Ricky co-founded a couple of machine learning startups and spent 8.5 years at Australia's premier technology R&D institute as a researcher and business developer. Now, one more fun fact. Ricky actually holds a PhD in computer science from the University of Queensland, and his thesis title? A resource discovery protocol for modern computing environments. Sounds kind of tricky, but more on that later, perhaps. So today, I'll be asking Ricky all about his career successes, his failures and rookie moves, and of course, all the learnings that he's had along the way. Welcome, Ricky!
Hey, Rachel. Great to see you.
Thanks so much for coming on today.
Absolutely great to be here.
Yeah, no pressure, right? I'm the rookie myself here. We're in it together.
It'll go great.
All right, let's kick off with talking a little bit about your career background. Can you tell me how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. But oh my goodness, let's not talk about my PhD though. That was such a long time ago, like 2003 or something. I think but even back then, even all the way back to my undergrad, I was always, interested in how to connect people with words, art, and technology. And that resource discovery stuff, it had a number of geeky applications. But the very first working app I built with that was for discovering MP3 music files across a bunch of those old school mobile feature phones. And, one other thing that I did back then, probably right just before I started my PhD in 2001, it was to build my own blogging system, actually, which, in hindsight, probably foreshadowed in a big way what I was going to end up doing with my life. So I was like a prolific writer back then. I had this probably misguided notion that people might be interested in what I had to say, but there was one blogging platform that I knew of. It's called Blogger, and I didn't like it at all. And WordPress at that point was probably 2 or 3 years away still. I just wanted something to let me keep a journal of my PhD work and kind of sort through my own very muddle-headed views on various topics and, review the movies I was watching and just engage in wonkish banter with my research colleagues. I'm sure the sort of stuff I'd be truly embarrassed to go back and read now. So, but
Oh, absolutely.
at that point, I had no conception that anyone other than me or my brother might actually want to use that blogging platform. I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was back then. So I guess I've learned a few things since then. And the other thing is probably relevant for this podcast is much later on, I actually started an online tech news publication for my home state of Queensland, where we are here in Australia. And yeah, that was probably another indicator of my passion for, words and technology. And we had a handful of writers, actual journalists contributing, and we paid them. And, one or two of our pieces got republished in overseas websites. And so, yeah, I was kind of proud of that publication. But the tech scene here in Brisbane back then was so small, we kind of just ran out of things to talk about. So there was a government official kind of body responsible for catalyzing the startup scene here in Queensland. And they liked what we were doing. So I handed ownership over to them, and I went on to do other things. And I'm honestly not sure what's become of that publication since then.
What a fascinating pivot you've made from wanting to write as a student and share your thoughts to launching a full-blown journalism outlet. That's a pretty big leap for anyone, I'd say.
Yeah.
But looking how far, you've come, at least to now, it kind of does make sense. So, I mean, I'll be sure to pop a link in the show notes for anyone who's keen to, if it's still
I
around, have a
have no
peek.
idea. I haven't checked in years. So
Oh, we can find out together.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, Ricky, as promised, we're going to dive into some of your defining successes here at Shorthand. What parts of Shorthand, whether that be a feature or a strategy, have had the biggest impact on the world of content or the world in general?
Mm, good question. Like, I don't know whether you'd classify this as a strategy, but I think the best thing we've done here at Shorthand is just maintain a really strong focus on the product and keeping that product as easy to use as possible, as we've added more features. And I think that's been absolutely key. The other thing that we did soon after I started leading the team at Shorthand was to enable people to sign up and start using it for themselves. Like, it never made sense to me that we would go to the effort of building this really super simple product and this beautiful product, and we would tell everyone how simple it was to create, magnificent stories, but then to keep it under lock and key and guarded by salespeople. So when we let people into the product to try it out, like, that's when like word of mouth really started taking off, and that eventually meant more paying customers were coming in who were creating more stories, and then people would see those stories, which meant more customers, and so on. And so that worked really well for us. And to this day, those organic channels, they drive probably 80% or more of our new revenue every month. And yeah, and that revenue we plow right back into the product, right? So we just want to keep making that product better for our customers, because that's how we roll. So product and customers, and building a team where those two things are what matter most every day. And I don't think you could call it a strategy, but honestly, it's all that matters, like especially early on in the life of a company like ours.
Ricky, it's been super valuable to hear about your successes and some of the strategies you've used while you've been at Shorthand. So thanks so much for sharing these. Now, that said, there's also a whole lot of value that can come from talking about our mistakes and our failures. And of course, no one loves talking about mistakes, right? But it's always fascinating to hear how people learn from these, pivot, and grow. So, for the sake of courage and growth, let's talk
Yeah,
failures.
well, we love courage and growth here at Shorthand for sure. So biggest failures. Huh. Yeah. So back in 2016 and 2017, we did the thing that you're like never, ever, ever supposed to do, which is to rebuild the entire product from scratch. It sounds so daft when I'm saying it out loud now. But, at that point, I'd recently stepped away from doing any engineering work, like in the early days, right? Like even the CEOs in there doing things in the weeds, right? And so several members of our pretty small team back then were keen to move our product onto a more modern stack. And so some of the things that we wanted to build into the product probably would have been harder to do on that old stack. Um, Now I figured, okay, I'm not going to be in there engineering anymore, so I should let the engineers work on the stack that they want to. So it was a kind of classic disagree and commit kind of situation. Anyway, 6 months turned into a year, which turned into an extremely like short cash runway, and we barely survived. But thankfully, sales were going gangbusters at that time, and we do have a lovely product, at the back end of it all. one wonders at the opportunity cost of that decision. It was a big, early lesson in CEO-ship for me, and, the heightened responsibilities that kind of come with that role. I think you've got to learn the difference between a disagree and commit situation and just like a flat out disagree and we're not doing that situation. Like in this case, I never really understood what the business payoff would be given the risk. And so it definitely fell into the latter category, right? Now, since then, we've tried lots of little things and a couple of big things that have failed. But, the payoff, should they have succeeded, would have been large and clear. And so, they're the kinds of failures you don't regret. So, yeah, there you go. How's that for a confession?
Yeah, not too bad. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ricky. I love how you spoke about the weighing up of those like disagree and we're not doing it versus disagree and dive in head
Mm,
first.
yep, yep. Really important. I think it's a Jeff Bezos lesson, that one.
All right, Ricky. So this next question is a little bit tongue in cheek, but it's certainly worth asking. We've all been the rookie before and we've all made those really cringeworthy mistakes on the job. What's a mistake you've made that's kind of funny in hindsight?
Oh man. Well, first of all, I'll never stop being a rookie, I don't think. There's just always so much to learn, right? And that's what makes it a fun. That's what makes it fun and a challenge. But cringeworthy. I once had a brand agency, a well-known brand agency here in Australia, spend a little bit of time on a new brand and logo for us to go along with a product strategy that focused on team collaboration and kind of viral acquisition of our new users. And, now I shared the initial results of that with the team, and someone commented, quite rightly, that the logo looked like toilet paper.
Oh no.
That is actually perfect example of the kind of straight talk that we like really value here at Shorthand. And, ultimately we didn't move forward with that like we did with the product rebuild. So like maybe it doesn't even count as a mistake. I don't know, because we never actually did it, right? We never executed it. But it was a side exploration that cost us probably a couple of days of my time and not very much money. So definitely one I can laugh about now. But so like, why did I do that? Like occasionally as a leader, that like there are times when you're trying to get the team to focus on something beyond the next feature release and, to take a leap with you. And sometimes it's really hard to do because, everyone's super busy. They've got so much on their plate, especially when you're a team of like 15 or 20 or whatever we were back then. Gosh, we've grown so much since then. But I mean, it's no wonder people didn't have the time and the bandwidth to think 5 years down the track, right? So when sometimes you need to generate an event or a symbol that says, you know what, we can't wait any longer. And we have to take this bold step into the future together. And so, that proposed brand overhaul was the symbol to prove that I, really, really meant this. And, in the end, it was just like the inconceivable idea that we'd end up with a toilet paper logo. That was enough to get people having the kinds of conversations I wanted them to be having around collaboration features in our product and all of that. So we dropped the rebrand and kept our existing beautiful, bold logo, which I'm very happy about. I wish I could say I'd planned all of that out from the beginning, but really it was just a terrible logo. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I'm okay. For one, I'm super glad we kept the current logo. But for two,
Yeah.
maybe the loo paper logo could have been the symbol for during the pandemic. Everyone was out of loo roll, right?
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
Ricky, this next question ties in really nicely then to your rookie mistake
Mhm.
answer. What advice would you give your younger self?
Right. I think I've answered this question on a different podcast before. And I think my answer probably hasn't changed. When you're young, on a whole number of dimensions. You don't really know how far the dials turn, right? So you think you've turned the dial as far as it goes, but you're actually not even halfway there yet. And so the dimension that stands out for me, the dial that I should have turned and could have turned a lot further, is focus. You can always be more focused, and that dial just keeps on turning. So I'd say to my younger self, when you think you're as focused as you can be, you're not even close. So focus more. Yeah.
Amazing. And for listeners who are hearing this advice and wondering, okay, on a practical level, how can I do that? How can I hone in my focus? Do you have any examples of where you've really taken that concept and put it to work in your own professional life?
Yeah. Well, I think I think where it's come out most for me as a leader now is just not quite settling for the first version of something, right? So it's like, no, this can be simpler. This can be more polished. We can do a better job of this, right? So, and then just cutting out the noise. Like there's so many different things that we could be doing, and you just never have enough resources to do them all. So you've got to be brutal. Another thing I didn't talk about is, in order to keep our focus on shorthand, on that professional storytelling tool, I closed down 2 other products that we had, and they were beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous products, but they were on completely different technology stacks, which I never understood why we would do that. And they were focused in different markets. So one was consumers and one was kind of independent journalists and freelancers. And as beautiful as they were, and they were growing, we shut them down. And that was one of the best decisions we made, right? It meant that we had the focus to turn shorthand into a product that's now, thriving, that our customers love. But yeah, focus.
Wow, Ricky, thank you so much for sharing on that. It must have been a hard decision to come to close those other two product offerings. Can you talk to that a little more?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they were gorgeous products, and they were growing. They had people who loved them. But, we needed to focus our energies on our professional storytelling platform. And that's meant that shorthand, as everyone knows it today, can thrive, which it is. And so, yeah, it was a really tough call. It makes me emotional still to think about it to this day, but it was definitely the right call. Here we are, and we've got tens of thousands of users, hundreds and hundreds of customers who love it. And yeah, I think it was the right call.
As someone who was once on the client side and is now part of Team Shorthand, I can absolutely attest it was the right call.
Cool.
It's an
Good,
amazing
good to hear.
product.
Yeah.
So, Ricky, what's been the most interesting or fascinating change that you've seen in the industry?
First question would be, which industry? Like the funny thing is, even in that kind of feature editorial, immersive storytelling space, there are so many differences between roles and titles and who's using it and what team's doing it and which customer organization. I guess the most fascinating thing to see right now is how people are taking shorthand like far, far beyond the original purpose which it was created, which was high-end feature storytelling. But now we have folks creating engaging reports of all kinds, got sales proposals being made for like $1 million deals, beautiful auction lots for artworks and other items like that, course content for e-learning, landing pages, even just individuals doing really amazing CVs, resumes, and like portfolios. So like the industry now is really just this like amalgamation of content creators, right? And some of whom are, really highly skilled in graphic design, and others who, like me, are not. And, they're empowered by content creation tools like shorthand across a wide variety of use cases. And yet, the thread, at least for us, the thread running through all of this is just the desire to move hearts and minds. And, that's rooted in storytelling. Yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
No, spot on. That's awesome. And you're absolutely right. There's so much opportunity to talk about the things you love on the web in a way that is immersive and exciting. And I think the way that the world is moving in the space of storytelling is, I just get really thrilled about it because,
Yeah.
like, we're on the precipice of Web 3.0, and what a time to be
Yeah.
alive. What a time to be in
So
storytelling,
what is
honestly.
Web3? Yeah.
Exactly. So, our next question, Ricky, and I'm keen to hear your
Mhm.
take. What excites you about the future of the industry?
Yeah. So, I mean, that industry, which I talked about, which is just this coming together of all different sort of verticals who all have this similar need to just create amazing content, whatever it is that they happen to be doing. And so I guess what excites me the most is probably just like the infinite possibilities. There are just so many potential ways to communicate with an audience in, high fidelity. And it might feel like that we've already pushed the web to its limits, but I don't think so. I think there are whole new dimensions of magic to be discovered in terms of what's possible within a web browser and how that translates into brilliant new ways to like conjure emotion and transmit knowledge and move minds and hearts. So in fact, I don't think like I know because like we're hard at work on this stuff, right? So I know that the web's got a long, long way to go from where it is.
And to follow on from, that beautiful sentiment you've just put forward, Ricky, I also feel it's the potential for community on the web as well. Like, there's so much happening, and people are coming together and sharing all their favorite things, just like the way you would have liked to do when you were a PhD student wanting to share about the movies you were watching and the work you were doing. It's just beautiful to think how far it's all come. And I suppose, like, what's next,
Yeah, absolutely. And just, the further we go, just the easier and easier it's going to become to create much, much better looking content. And anyone is going to have the capacity to do that because the platforms like Shorthand will just do more and more of the heavy lifting in terms of the design and the magic and what's possible. And so that's truly exciting because an overused word, but it democratizes the ability for people to do this kind of content.
Now, Ricky, I'm sure you've come across, I mean, hundreds and thousands of beautiful pieces of content on the web. So this next question might be a little tricky, but what's your favorite piece of content on the web?
One piece. Um,
One piece.
oh boy, that is tricky. Like obviously there's lots of great shorthand content out there these days, which is, awesome. But let me think of something that's not shorthand. All right, the one that pops into my head is ohdeargames.com. And I don't even know whether it's still online, but to this day, I think it's one of the coolest, smoothest, immersive experiences that I've come across that's built using just plain, pure web standard technology. So HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and nothing more. It's a really simple interaction, but it just has that kind of magic to it. And if it is offline, it'll be in the Wayback Machine somewhere. So we'll dig it up.
So for anyone who hasn't seen this page, Ricky ever so kindly sent me the link ahead of our recording. And let me tell you, as you scroll through it, it genuinely feels like you're floating on a cloud through like a snowy mountain valley and you're taking in their info. It's genuinely the kind of page that makes you stop and say, "Oh, it's incredible." So if you're keen
I
to
think it
check
won
out,
some Webbies or was nominated for some Webby awards. Yeah.
oh, true. Wow. Very well deserved. So, look, for anyone who's keen to check it out, we have found it back in the web archives and I'll pop a link in the show notes as well. Okay, Ricky, I think we're coming up on our time, but I wanted to close by asking you one last question. If you had a captive audience of 100,000 people and a microphone in your hand, what would you want those people to know about you, your work, or your approach to storytelling?
Well, I guess our approach to storytelling is to be the people who make the best tools for storytellers to use. Now, there's this popular notion in marketing that, as a provider of products and services, you're supposed to be the expert in your customer's field. And I agree with that to an extent, but I don't quite see it like that altogether. So, we're never going to be as good at your job as you are, because your job is nuanced and it relies on like this tacit knowledge that's been shaped over time. And so, like, I have this favorite analogy, right? So, I see ourselves as the luthier, right? The master craftsperson who makes the most perfect sounding violin and that feels just right, when you hold it. And I see our customers as the virtuosos who create the most beautiful music using the instrument that we've lovingly crafted for them. So now, like, as the luthier, we can provide some guidance to the virtuoso how to get the best sound out of our instrument in particular situations. And the virtuoso can give us feedback about what might make the violin better, right? But, it's not the luthier's place to teach the virtuoso how to play the four seasons to begin with, and, in the virtuoso's own unique style. So, in the same way, I think our customers are the master storytellers, and we just provide them with the best tools to tell their stories, tools which we pour our hearts and souls into. So our relationship with our customers, it's this beautiful symbiosis. And I guess the great news about shorthand, as I was saying before, is that, it can make everyone in that audience of 100,000 people you mentioned look like content creation virtuosos. So, we are our own customer too, where we use shorthand internally for like all sorts of things every single day. But again, like, our content and our stories are going to be different from your content and your stories. And using shorthand, like, everyone can combine words, images, videos, and so on to create incredible content in their own like unique voice and style, like content that they'll truly be proud of. And that's what we aim for.
What a beautiful reflection to end on. And indeed, what beautiful music our customers are making.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That's what we live for. We get out of bed just to see the amazing things that our customers are doing with the platform every day. Yeah.
Well, Ricky, I can't thank you enough for jumping on the podcast with me today. It's been such a fantastic chat.
That was great. Thanks for having me on the podcast, Rachel.
Well, what an incredible episode. I'm so glad that Ricky could join us on the podcast today and share some of his insights. Now, before we wrap up, I wanted to challenge you. In this episode, Ricky spoke about the success he found with unlocking the shorthand platform and welcoming in new users to create and share stories. This move led to wins all round for both the company and its virtuoso clients. The challenge for this episode, then, should you choose to accept, is to try your hand at publishing your first immersive story using shorthand. You can create and share up to 3 stunning features, or reports, portfolios, blogs, you name it, completely free. You can find all the details you need to start creating in the show notes. Well, that's all for today's episode. We have some amazing guests lined up for future, but if you'd like to come on and talk about content and storytelling on the web, please do get in touch. I'd love to have you on. Thanks again for tuning into this episode of The Craft, and until next time, happy storytelling.
Thank you for checking out this episode of The Craft. This show is brought to you by Shorthand, a platform that helps professional content creators produce beautiful stories without writing a single line of code. If you enjoyed what you learned in this episode, make sure to follow The Craft wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Or visit shorthand.com/podcast to get immediate access to all the latest episodes.